with all due respect.
Hey, we're Josh Ortegon and Greg Gaines, and this is With All Due Respect, the show where we keep it real about health, fitness, and performance. From weight loss to sports development, we're covering the conversations that matter.
Follow us on Instagram at Phenom Fitness, PHNM Fitness, and visit www.phenomfit.com to check out our training programs, coaching, and gear built for real results. Let's get into it.
All right, thank you for watching With All Due Respect with Eric Wilson, the episode with Eric Wilson. Probably one of the more human interest stories.
Definitely.
On here. Eric's been a friend of mine for a long time. I've known his story. I was on his podcast. We're going to talk about everything from him being a coach to big pharma stories to his own personal struggles, getting healthy and, fighting chronic pain. He said something in this post that in his interview that really hit me. He uses the phrase "be capable," and I've actually used that with my kid. Told him to be capable. What about you? You the first time meeting Eric, and obviously we're both moved by this podcast, right? I mean,
Yeah, well, I was going to say, if anybody saw my Instagram story from the day that we recorded, I posted that all three of us had
all three of
cried
us, little tears.
during that. And I would say, like, I'm kind of a crier. I cry more so over like dogs than I do anything else. But this story, it was 100% moving. Like, it was very intense to talk about it. And I love that we've released the videos and the podcast with Don previously that kind of introed us to chronic pain. And now we can get someone like Eric to tell their personal story with chronic pain. So I'm really excited for people to hear this story.
Yeah, I agree. Hope you guys enjoy the episode. Make sure you check out Phenom Fit. The link will be below. If you want to check out our Patreon, we have workouts, nutrition guides, consults, coaching, all the above we offer. But most importantly, we hope you enjoy this episode.
Thanks, y'all.
All right, this is With All Due Respect. We don't even know the episode number, but we're flying with it.
I did write them down and I sent them, but I never know what it is either. I think it's like 60, maybe.
I don't know, man.
Are y'all doing one every week? If you're doing 60,
trying
you're ahead of me
to.
already.
Yeah,
we're trying to do one a week. Yeah,
that's a cadence right there.
Yeah, well, I get married next month, and so I'm leaving for
Congrats.
a month. Thank you. And so we're trying to stay ahead of the curve long enough to kind of fill that. So Josh can record a few while I'm gone, but not feel,
she's gone. I'm gonna do like a jujitsu series.
Yeah,
bring in like jujitsu people.
I'm still doing every 2 weeks. I can't do the every week thing. That's too much. That's too much of a cadence for me.
Can you name
every two?
What the name of your podcast is so people can hear it?
Yeah, Do Not Go Quietly with Eric Wilson.
And I like that.
And you've had, like, for people who are listening to this that are in like the hunting subculture, bow shooting subculture, right? Because it is like me and you both know Burt Soren. It is a subculture. Like they're
sure. Oh yeah.
You've had you said Cam Haynes on?
No, I haven't had Cam Haynes on, but I've had some I've had some people that are non hunters too. Like I kind of try to everyone like sprinkle in some entrepreneurs and some performance people, like you were on there. But I had Jack Carr on. He wrote all the Terminal List series, that Amazon show that Chris Pratt's in. Did y'all see that?
Mm-hmm.
So I had him on last year, right before his last book came out. I've read all of his books, but he's the one that did that series. They're filming the second season right now, and then they've got a spinoff with Taylor Kitsch coming out called The Dark Wolf, and we talked about that last year. So I've had him on. Let's see, Josh Smith, who owns Montana Knife Company, which is a really big, like, American-made knife manufacturer. So I've had some people on that are non-hunters, but I've also, within the hunting community, I've had probably some of the biggest whitetail guys on in the country. Like I had, if you're a bow hunter, you'll know, like I've had Andy May on. I had Joe Miles on, who lives in town. Y'all know Joe.
I know his kid.
He owns Osseo Gear. I had Cliff Gray on twice, who has guided out west, and he's a big bow hunting guide, around elk and mule deer and So I've had a bunch of those people in the community on, but yeah, that's kind of what it is. It's like bow hunting, physical performance, and then, some just stuff I think is cool.
What got you into bow hunting side of it? What got you into, I mean, because from what Sean said, so the connection is, I've known Eric since coaching football through Reggie Shaw.
Long time. What,
15
20
years.
years?
Yeah,
Yeah.
20 years. Even knew
Close.
you before when you were coaching.
Hmm.
Before that, knew who you were with Jeff Scott, and then started coaching with you. And then Sean, my physical therapist, your physical therapist, same people.
Right.
Sean told me you're into like, he's like, I don't know. Last I talked to Eric, he was gonna hike out in the middle of somewhere and kill elk and drag them out like some crazy. Like, what have you been?
Let's hope.
What got you into?
Like a lot of people, I think, um, I was kind of in a hiatus from coaching, and I had seen, I saw Cam Hanes on Joe Rogan, which I think had a lot impact on a lot of people who weren't in the hunting culture. And I thought it looked kind of cool, but it wasn't like, oh, let me go do that. And then just kind of through a weird series of events, Tyler Renew, who we all know, played at Citadel, and he worked at Sorinex. And he was like, he goes, you really should meet Bert. He's like, y'all, I think would really hit it off. So I had lunch with Bert. I don't know, it's probably like almost 3 years ago now. And I had never been a hunter, right? Every fall was on the football field. But my brother had like kind of taught himself to bow hunt growing up. He wasn't a team sport guy. He was always a guy out in the woods. And I was just kind of like, oh, that's interesting, but I never had time to do it or even think about it. And then I had lunch with Bert, and Bert's huge into bow hunting. And, he started pulling out this app and showing me all this stuff. And here's what you do. And you got to play the wind, and like, you got to figure out where they bed. And then you got to do this. And I was like, dang, this is kind of like football. He's like, oh yeah, there's so much strategy involved in it. And he's like, go down and shoot a bow. Just go down and like shoot one once and see if you like it. And I went down to the bow shop where he sent me, pulled the bow back, shot about 4 or 5 times. I was terrible, but like just the entire process of it, I don't know what it was, mesmerized me. And so kind of those three things together, as soon as I did that, I called him and he's like, did you like it? I'm like, yeah, now what do I do? And so that was it. Like I bought a bow, I shot like a whole off season. And then I just kind of kept talking to mostly Bert and Joe, trying to get ready to hunt. And that was like 2 seasons ago. And so this is my third season coming up. And then last year I decided to go out west and try to tackle an elk hunt on my own. And I did like 7 days out in the mountains and did not get an elk, but learned a lot. So,
Where were you at?
Colorado, up probably about 7-10 miles south of the Wyoming border.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
I used to live in Montana, and that's where we're getting married.
Oh, really?
So, yep.
Dang.
Yeah.
And you
It's the
came back to
best.
South Carolina, huh? I wish I could get
I
my
know.
sister out west. She won't do it.
It's the best.
How do you
What
prepare
part of
for
Montana?
a 7-day hunt on your own?
Oh, I mean, so one of the reasons I started the podcast was honestly because it gave me an opportunity to learn from people, right, that are really good at this stuff. And I was like, if you call up some guy randomly or message him on Instagram and go, hey, will you jump on the phone with me for an hour and a half? I got some questions. Like, probably not. But if you've got a podcast and go, hey, would you get on a podcast with me? I want to talk about blah, blah, blah. Most of the time they say yes. So through podcasting, I've gotten to interview a lot of really good bow hunters. And because of that, I've gotten to know them. And so Cliff Gray, who's the guy that probably is the guy I leaned on the most, guided for 20 years out there, still does, but he owned a guide company. And I was literally just like hammering him all the time, with questions and how do you prepare and what do you do and what do I do in this situation? What do I do in this situation? And then other guys that I had on the podcast, talking to them, like I kind of scheduled it. So I had a bunch of elk hunters on for like the 6 months leading up to my hunt. And every time I got one of them on, I would ask them different questions about stuff that I wanted to learn about. So one of them would be scouting. One of them would be like, what happens if what's your best thing around calling? And the next one would be like, okay, how do you find them? And so I kind of did that. I used that as a way to try to learn.
Do you think being a football coach, getting out of football, like there's a there's a specific personality, man. You played football growing up, you went and played college football, you became a college coach. I'm sure there's one point you thought that was your career, right? Like I'm going to be an offensive line coach or an offensive coordinator
Yeah.
in college, right?
Well, that's what I thought. Like when I decided I wanted to be a college football coach, I was like, that's what I'm gonna do for the rest of my life. Like there was no thought that I would do anything different.
Do you draw a parallel between I think I'm done coaching, I got to have something else or I'm going to go crazy?
For sure. Yeah. I didn't do them in a deep.
Together.
Okay.
So
So
we had technical issue.
you, yeah, yes. I was just gonna say, I mean, so at 57, in your 50s, like what I kind of got to the point was I decided, or I figured out, you either accept the aging process as like the slow decay of your body, where things just kind of go wrong and you live with it, or you figure out how to be proactive and also your mind and just challenge yourself to do something different and completely new. And so for me, the bow hunting thing was like I literally feel like when I was 20 years old and I was like trying to learn to be a football coach, and I remember being in meetings and in rooms with guys who had won national championships and listening to them talk and thinking they have so much knowledge. I'll never know that much about football. And over the course of 30 years, I got to a level where I had a really good knowledge of the game, and a lot of people would then come try to talk to me about stuff. But hunting for me is like being a 20-year-old football coach. And what I've found is, while it can be really frustrating, it's also like if you don't, I think, proactively decide to challenge yourself mentally and physically as you get older, there's a point in your life where everything just kind of goes on autopilot. And if you don't like thoughtfully disrupt that pattern, everything becomes mundane. And that's when I think people start making really bad life choices.
That's what I was going to
They
say.
haven't, yeah.
Yeah, with like depression, for me, I'm like, personally, I've never experienced depression. I can't fully explain what that looks like. I know we can dive into that topic a little bit, but when somebody lives the same lifestyle every single day, I'm like, that's such a contributor to your overall happiness. And if you're not doing anything to challenge your mindset or challenge your body or challenge anything in your life, like obviously you're going to feel the effects of that. It just feels so mundane. Mm-hmm.
I agree with you. And I think as I've processed that, like when you're younger, those changes happen and occur naturally through the progression of your life, right? Mm-hmm. High school to college or high school to your first job. And then you kind of push through your career and you're like chasing after something like, and maybe you change jobs and you're like, oh, I'm going to get more money or I'm going to do this. And then you get married and that's an exciting new challenge. And then maybe you have kids and that's exciting. And it's like, it's natural. And then at a certain point, all that stuff levels out and it all stops happening. And that's when it's like, oh, this is the same, like you said, every day. And if you don't figure out a way to continue to challenge yourself, both mentally and physically, especially as you kind of get to, your 40s and 50s, that's when people like have affairs. That's when people turn to drugs and alcohol. That's that whole thing everyone calls a midlife crisis. That's what that is.
Mm-hmm.
That's a scary place, bro. That's what jujitsu is for me.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
I've never done anything in my life that I started out as that horrible. I was
I know how that feels.
I was so bad. I realized how horrible I was at something. I realized how defenseless I was. I realized I was nowhere near as tough as I thought I was.
Yeah.
And it was so miserable, bad, and I was so bad at it. I couldn't imagine coming home and accepting myself for who I was after the first day I ever did jujitsu. I go, I can't accept that that's me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm that
I
bad.
get that.
And it's embarrassing to where like your buddies that do it, like they kind of laugh at you when you try to do it. And you're like, this is horrible. I've never been, so I can relate to that. And the aging process of like, no, I got to do something that keeps my brain going, right? I relate to that on a highly emotional level.
Mm-hmm.
That is what hunting came before you like, you're probably like when you first got addicted to it, I would say addiction, not really addiction, but when you first got into it, I bet you were like, you get a 30-minute break in your day, you're on YouTube looking at stuff. You're looking at bows, you're looking at stuff, where do they hunt, looking at people, trying to filter in. Like, I bet it was like taking in water through a fire hose.
Yeah, it was like, and my wife she used to say, like, can you do anything and just, passively enjoy it? Is there, like, you have to do
I don't
everything?
know
No, like, she's like, you have an addictive personality. I'm like, yeah, I probably do, which most of the time is positive, but I also have to reel it back. But you're right. In the beginning, it was like I was watching YouTube constantly trying to learn stuff. Um, and now if I get a 30-minute break in the middle of the day, I just walk outside and shoot my bow. I've got, luckily I live on a couple acres and I've got some space. And so I've got targets set up and, a couple deer targets set up and I can stretch it out to about 70 yards and I just go out and shoot. And it's so awesome because it's literally like the only time in the entire day where I have to shut my brain off completely, because you can't shoot a bow, you can't shoot archery and have your brain in other places. Like, you're terrible. So you have to be completely focused.
I want to talk a little bit about being able to even do this.
Yeah.
Right. Being able, people need to hear the story of you went through an incredible journey of back pain.
Yeah.
From back surgery. You said you gained a bunch of weight. You were coaching in complete pain. You spent years in pain, right? And from that became some other issues. I want you to explain. But can you explain what you went through to even be able to do this? What process you went through? What led up to back injury, back surgery, back pain? And like, this isn't just a guy you weren't just a dude that was in really good shape and all of a sudden you just picked up a bow. You had to go through some pretty dark times to be able to do this.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of this was a culmination of, when I went in to see Sean, and which will kind of, that's the end or the beginning of the good part. But I remember when I went in to see him, and at this point I was close to 300 pounds. And that was not like my normal weight in life had always been 220 to 230. When I was training, I did, when I did triathlons for a long time. And even when I did triathlons, that's what I weighed. I was like, in the Clydesdale division. And I got to the point where I did like a half Ironman and I was doing some of that stuff. And then when I started having kids and I didn't have as much time to train, I get into CrossFit. And so I was always super physically active and it was always performance-based stuff. And at some point towards my late 40s, I started having pain on my left side of my back for, I don't know, probably 18 months. And I just kind of slowly trained less and less to try to like live with it and accommodate it. Right. I didn't identify it right out of the gate as like something that was chronic. It was a lot of nerve pain that was going down my leg, like back of my leg, my hip, down to my foot. And I finally went into a surgeon after about 18 months. And he was like, oh, you've got like all kinds of, bony outgrowth, and you've got a disc that's kind of bulging on that spinal nerve. We just need to go in orthoscopically, kind of shave it all down. So that's what we did. And it helped, like, it really like corrected that left side. But I didn't, his thing to me was like, hey, you can't train the way you used to train, right? If you do, it's going to this is going to happen again. And so I worked out some, but I wasn't great at it. And throughout this time, like I was slowly kind of putting on weight, right? Like a little bit at a time. And then probably a year and a half later, I started experiencing the same pain in the right side of my right side, pain all the way down my right leg, same stuff. Went back to the same guy. He's like, we pretty much need to do the same thing. So we did. It didn't fix anything. So this one, like the pain stayed. And at this point, first time around, I got put on some pain medicine, had surgery, came off the pain medication. Second time around, I really was trying to put surgery off longer. and back on pain medication, was taking it. It was like Vicodin, 10 milligrams, and in the beginning it was 10 milligrams a day. And then it was like 10 milligrams twice a day. And then it was like 10 milligrams 3 times a day. And I just kind of continued to need more and more. And after that second surgery didn't work, the same thing kind of kept happening. I got up to the point where I was taking like 60 milligrams of hydrocodone a day. And it still wasn't fixing the pain. So the two things that and I don't really know how much this third one had played in, but I found an experimental procedure that was a cash pay, and it was a guy down in Texas. And his whole thought process around this was that the pain on the nerve was not coming from the disc bulging on the nerve, but was coming from something he called leaky disc syndrome, which is where when that disc bulges and ruptures, there's a fluid inside of it, right? It's the soft fluid that keeps that disc soft, and it leaks out of that disc. Well, the body keeps producing more fluid to try to fill the disc up, and it keeps leaking out. And his whole, theory is that as it leaks onto that spinal nerve and causes inflammation, causes all kinds of nerve pain. And so he came up with this procedure where under fluoroscopy, he created this thing where it's like a mix of fibrinogen and like 2 other substances. It's basically like a glue, and he pumps it into your disc, and it like seals your disc and then pumps that disc up. And so when he went and put me under fluoro, he found 5 discs that were leaking. And so he sealed all of them, pumped them all back up. And he was like, it's not going to give you 100% relief, but most of my patients get to like 70%. But it takes like 12 months for that thing to kind of calm down and not be so angry anymore, that nerve. So I did notice that it started gradually getting better, and that was like August. And then, during that football season, I was really hurt, and you noticed that. You were like, hey, you need to go see my PT, Sean. I didn't go the first time because I had seen 2 other physical therapists, and I had gotten nothing out of it, and I was really kind of calloused against PT. And so I didn't do anything with it. And then when the season was over, I saw you again in like December, and you were like, hey, did you ever go see Sean? And I said, no. And you're like, hey, you're an idiot. Like, you need to go see him. I had surgery on I had cervical surgery, and I'm like back doing jujitsu already. So I was like, all right. So I scheduled an appointment with him, went in there. And this is kind of where the whole bow hunting thing kind of comes in, is he goes, all right, what's your goal? And I was like, at this point, this is a 3-year kind of process, 3 or 4 years. And at this point, I weighed close to 300 pounds, when I was had been 225, 230. I'm like, dude, I can hardly walk to the end of my driveway, A, because I'm fat, and B, because like my nerve pain is so bad. Like I was walking hunched over. It'd take me an hour in the morning to kind of get out of bed, get dressed, and just get functional, like wait for the hydrocodone to kick in. I was like, dude, I can hardly like get to the end of my driveway. He goes, don't tell me what you can or can't do. Tell me what you want to do. I said, okay, I want to go out west, and I want to do a 7-day elk hunt with my bow. And he's like, well, what does that mean? I said, well, that means I got to be able to go up and down a mountain 8 to 12 miles a day, with 2,000 to 4,000 feet of elevation gain on a daily basis. I'm like, which in my mind seemed like literally impossible, right? He goes, okay, well, give me an hour, let me evaluate you, and then let's see. So he put me through all kinds of stuff that like was painful as hell. Like I literally couldn't stand up straight, y'all. Like I stood like this. He's like, try to stand straight. I couldn't. My hips, hip flexors, my piriformis, all that stuff had shortened so much because of walking bent over that I literally physiologically couldn't stand up. But he put me through all these things, and at the end he goes, I think I can get you there. And I was like, what? Like, don't BS me, dude. And he said, no. He goes, he's like, yes, you have, some physiology probably still with your back. But he said, I think the majority of your pain is coming from all these deficiencies that have been created because your body has like adapted to this back pain over time. And he's like, I think if we get you strong in all these different areas, lengthen all those ligaments out, like strengthen those associated stabilizer muscles, he's like, I think we can get you back to a point where you can be pretty physically capable. He's like, you'll probably never be completely pain free, but at least He's like, would you rather be, you know, 70% in a bunch of pain or 70% like physically active with some pain? I was like, the last one. He's like, all right, well, let's try it. So that was really like our goal the whole time. Was the guide as I trained every day was, if it's a, he basically said, what can you live with that you can push through? And I said, probably a 7. He's like, all right,
you're tougher. I couldn't do that.
I mean, I don't know. At
Well,
that point,
you're
dude,
living life at a 9, right?
Exactly. At that point, every day is like a 9, 10, right? So I'm like, I go, if I can get to a 7 and I could push like and still be physically. So I was like, okay, I could do that. So that was our guide every time I trained. He's like, if it's a 7, push through it. If it goes past a 7, stop and modify. And that's what we did. And gradually over time, I just got a ton more physically capable. I gradually like lost all that weight, and like the pain continued to go down to the point where I could manage it with ibuprofen. I also had this whole withdrawal thing journey that was, you know, miserable too, but that's a different story. And so I trained that whole winter, got myself to the point where, you know, that first season I just hunted whitetail, and then trained the entire, again, you know, another 12 months. And then last September, I went out to Colorado and did 7 days, you know, in the mountains hunting out.
So it was like a 18-month process. Is that about how long?
Mm-hmm.
That's just, I mean, I think like how capable our bodies are and how resilient our bodies are, but B, it just also makes me emotional, like thinking about how great Sean is at his job.
Oh, I mean, dude, he's an angel. I kid you not. Like, I literally think that is a blessing from God. Sean is.
Yeah.
And the fact that Josh is the one that got me to that is part of that like blessing. Like, that's what people always say, like, how did you do that? I'm like, I didn't do it. Like, God did it through some really good people in my life.
Yeah.
Can you touch a little bit? There's a psychological consequence to chronic pain.
Mm-hmm.
There's a psychological consequence to being at a withdrawal state in chronic pain. I think about like where it got to where you had to actually go see Sean, meaning like you're like, fine, I'll go do it. Like you're at breaking point at that point, right? Like at that point,
oh, for sure.
If somebody said, eat your table and you'll get better, you're like, all right, I'll chop up my table and eat, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'll jump out of it. Like, I'll figure it out. Where were you in that level of, I have nowhere else to go, so I'll call this guy at 300 pounds on 6 Vicodin a day? I would like to hear, you say it's a different story. I would like to hear that. If you're willing to share it, I would like to hear it.
No, yeah, no, I'm totally.
I've heard a little bit of it from when I was on your show, but like, you went through darkness.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a combination. Yeah, my doctor put me on, and I think he did it out of, you know, trying to be good because he knew how miserable I was. But so I got put on pain medication. It was 10 milligrams of Vicodin. And then I also got put on a benzodiazepine, which at the time I did not know is more addictive than narcotics. Like, it's one of the worst things you can get put on in terms of being able to come off of it if you use it chronically.
Right. Isn't it like one of the only ones that you have to do a withdrawal from?
It can actually kill you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like coming off of a narcotic is miserable, but it cannot kill you. Coming off of a benzo the wrong way, well, it can actually kill you.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, you can go into respiratory depression. And so I got put on both of those, and over time, it just didn't work, you know. And so I did go into a pretty deep state of depression for quite a while. You know, when you spend your whole life in the middle of performance and being able to like push your body to do things that you never thought it could do, and like that's honestly where I got a lot of my self-worth through a good part of my life, was like being able to do things that other people couldn't do, or being able to push my body to do something that I didn't think it could do. And when I couldn't do that anymore, I really struggled like with that. And then as I got heavier, and I just knew I looked terrible. I struggled with that. A lot of that stuff, right? And so and I think we talked about this, right? I never considered suicide, but I had always, up until this point, when I heard that somebody killed themselves, thought like, what a coward. That's the easy way out, right? Like, I can't believe somebody would do that. I got to a point where I was like, I never thought about killing myself, but I did think, I get how somebody could do it. Like, I get it, because I got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm 54, 53. I could live 30 years like this, just miserable every day. And I was like, I don't even know how you do that, right? So the thing that was really what pushed me into, I guess, doing something different, was my wife had, like, multiple times throughout the course of this thing, like, she was really concerned about the narcotics. And she would say, like, you're taking more, like, than you were before. Like, you really need to be careful. But she was trying to balance that with compassion and understanding that I was in a lot of pain. And there was, like, a day where I remember this was probably the hardest part of this whole thing. This is a place where I always get emotional, but she sat me down at the table and she was like, I want to say this to you from a place of love. She's like, you are not the same person that you were, before you started taking all this pain medication. She's like, I see it. At the time, our two other kids were out of the house. My son was in high school. It was very kind of like caught up in everything else that was going on in his life. But my daughter and I, who at the time, I think she was an 8th grader, a freshman, very close. And she goes, Riley Grace sees it and she says stuff about it. She's like, how come, like, I was always this corny, like, joke around, kind of screw around guy. She's like, how come daddy doesn't joke anymore? That was it.
That's
That
heartbreaking.
pushed you to get help, right? When your family sits you down and your kids say something, oh God, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. I mean, I knew that I wasn't, I think up until that point, I was so focused on what was going on with me. And then I realized, like, what an impact I was having on the people that I really love. And I was like, I gotta fix it somehow.
Yeah. And yeah. How hard?
Yeah. And then a lot of prayer. And then I think the prayer is what resulted in you and Sean, like, you getting me to Sean, right? Because you didn't just, like, you gave me his stuff, but then I didn't do anything with it. But then you came back again and were like, you need to call him, right? Like, you were pretty like firm about, like, dude, you need to talk to this guy. He's different. To the point where I was like, I listened to you. I was like, okay, I got you, because I respect, like, what you do. I respect where you're coming from. I respect the way you are with your family. Like, and I had seen, like, when you were like, hey, I had cervical surgery and I'm back rolling already.
I was fresh. It was sensitive to me because I was fresh out of chronic pain. I was fresh 6 months of, like, and I went through that. I remember I remember on the phone with my mom before I went to finally go through the process of surgery. I remember laying in my bed having a conversation with my mom, and I said, is this what the rest of my life is? Like, this pain is
sure.
Is this what it is? Because I'm not gonna do it. Like you, like,
right.
Living this way. Like, there's no shot. Right. I've been very active and strong and being able to defend myself and my family and fight for things that I needed to and act and live in a way. I say, I just don't have, I don't under, I, it does sound wimpy to say, I ain't going out this way. This ain't it. This ain't it. Right.
No.
This ain't it. So I think having fresh off it for me, knowing that you're in nerve pain, you're in legit pain, it was so fresh to me. I was almost just like, hey, you got it. Like, I can't not tell you to do it because it worked for me. Like you got to do it, right?
Mhm.
I think that's why I remember being kind of stern with it, because I'm like, well, I know what it's like to live that way. I don't want to see somebody I know live that way.
Well, I
Right.
remember when you told me too that you hadn't, like, up until that point, you had never really shared any of that stuff with me, right? It was just like I knew you had surgery, but you told me I had nerve pain. It had been chronic. A lot of the stuff that I had going on, you had the same stuff, so that resonated. So when you said it really made a difference for me, that meant something to me. And when you're like, you need to call him, and literally, I think I called him as soon as I left that day.
Yeah. One of the stories that you have that I think ties this together, well, there's two of them. I'd like to start with the first one. This is not your first connected relationship to pain drugs from in your life. You actually were you a sales rep? Is that what you would say?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. You worked for the drug company that made Oxycontin,
Hmm.
Mhm.
I did.
and you were part of the group of sales guys that were told, "Hey, this is fine. It's not addictive."
Yep.
Do you
Yeah.
see
So what?
you see that crazy connection of
Oh,
like,
all the time.
this is
Yeah. Anytime I have that conversation with the people, I'm like, yeah, I was sitting there talking to doctors about how non-addictive OxyContin was, because that's what we had been taught by doctors, right, who came in and trained us on it. And then 20 years later, I'm addicted to pain medication.
and you were told it wasn't addictive. You were told all that, and the reason I brought it up is the TV shows now are talking about it, right? There's the painkiller TV show.
Yeah, yeah.
There's all these shows about it, about that industry. Was that the 90s when that was going on?
Early 2000s.
Yeah, it
So
started late
yeah,
90s. Yeah.
it started late 90s, I think, and I went to work for Purdue. So when I got out of college coaching, that was my first real job outside of coaching was sales in pharmaceuticals. And I went to work for a Johnson and Johnson company selling a patch. It was a pain patch. And then Purdue hired me, um, and I was a rep for Purdue for 4 years. And it turns out that I was in one of the hottest, and when I say hot, I don't mean like best. I mean hot, like most investigated territories in the country, in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. It turned out that was one of the biggest places for drug diversion. There was a clinic there that was started by one doctor, and within I think 18 to 24 months, he had 5 doctors in there, and the only thing they did was pain management. And they literally everybody walked out of there with almost the same prescription of like 5 drug cocktail. And there were people in the beginning, it was just local stuff, but over time, I started seeing North Carolina license plates in the parking lot. And then I started seeing North Carolina and Kentucky and Florida and Georgia and like states, that were 3 states away. Uh, and then it got to the point where literally in the mornings, there would be a line around the building waiting for the door to open.
So
And
I was just
it,
like that show. It's crazy.
it was just like that show. And it got to the point where I I recognized what was going on. And the interesting thing was in the beginning, before I really recognized what was happening, there was a local DEA agent like who started calling me. And she was like, "Do you recognize what's going on? Do you realize like what's happening?" And I was ill equipped to deal with it. Like we had never been taught anything, right? We were taught go in and educate them on the drug. And like you said, what we were taught was that short-term pain medication. So Vicodin, Percocet, those drugs, the way they work in your body is if let's say it's 10 milligrams, you take that pill, your stomach digests it. As soon as you take it, all 10 milligrams is released immediately in your bloodstream. Oxycontin was one of a number of drugs that were what were called delayed release medications. So they were set up or built or in a way, compounded in a way where over time, instead of like, let's say you took 10 milligrams of Oxycontin, instead of it being released immediately into your bloodstream, that 10 milligrams was released gradually over a 12-hour period. And so the entire, what they said the research showed was that because you didn't get this spike in your blood system all day long, where you got this huge amount dumped into your bloodstream and then it went down and now you needed more and it went like this all day, that you had steady state pain control, that it wasn't addictive. And they actually had that in the package insert, that it had been proven to be less addictive. And so the package insert is the thing that gets approved by the Federal Drug Administration, by the FDA. And so when they trained us as reps, they were like, hey, this is a lot less addictive. The FDA even let us put it in our package insert. This is how we want you to educate doctors. That's what we were taught. And that's how we were that's what we were telling doctors when we went out and talked to them. We had studies that they provided for us. We had the package insert. And if you watch any of those shows, you kind of recognize now. And now that I've been out of pharma and I'm a lot older, I recognize that pharma is in bed with the FDA, and that's just, those two are inextricably linked. And the FDA is bought and paid for by big pharma. So it's pretty easy to get stuff like that done.
Yeah, it's interesting. You look back at that time and then you fast forward 20 years later, you hear people say, well, they would never do anything with pharmacy like a vaccine that would hurt people, would they? And then you look back at it, and just by saying that, this episode will get flagged on YouTube. Which, just by saying that, you kind of think back, and you would be the first one to raise your hand, and be like, I was
real life story.
That's not
right.
Rude.
Yeah, no, I mean, here's the thing too. I mean, most drugs have to go through a process of multiple clinical trials to get approved by the FDA. That usually takes, a fast approval is 6 years. Most of them take 8 to 10 from the very time you start studying them to the point where you figure out, okay, like, hey, physiologically this drug works. And then you do phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4 clinical trials all the way through human. The COVID vaccine didn't go through any of that. Literally nothing. So most drugs have been around for 8 to 10 years before they hit the market, and they've been tested on thousands of people before they hit the market. And even drugs that have gone through that, like think about Vioxx, right, which is a COX-2 inhibitor that had been on the market for, I think it was close to 8 years, when they recognized it was literally causing massive damage to people's hearts and killing people. So that drug had been out 18 years from its inception of research to the point where they recognized this is killing people. The COVID vaccine got approved for use after 4 months of development. So we're literally, 2 to 3 years into that vaccine. I mean, we have no idea what that's going to do to people long term. We know that it causes, a ton of issues in terms of inflammation of the heart, myocarditis, those kinds of things in younger people. But what happens to those people when they're 30 or 40 years old because they took the vaccine at 18 or 14?
Dude, Vioxx was awesome. I remember
Vioxx was great, man.
Twisted an ankle or hurting something in jiu-jitsu, or hurting something in like lifting weights or something. And it was like 2 Vioxx, 800 milligrams ibuprofen, a little bit of ice, move that thing in the morning, you're good to go.
Yep, that's right.
Incredible. That was like,
yeah.
I remember taking Vioxx
you're right.
time and feeling so much better after injuries. I'd be like, how do I get this? I need this at my house 24/7 just in case.
When did they pull that? I don't ever remember.
I don't know when they pulled Vioxx. I really don't know.
I want to say it was 2 to 3 years ago.
Was
Pretty
it?
recently.
I was going to say, I've never heard of
Vioxx.
Vioxx was one of the cool. Dude, I can't tell you how many times my turnaround time from an injury was 50%.
Have you ever heard of Celebrex, Gray?
Yeah, Celebrex.
I have heard of Celebrex.
Okay, so Vioxx and Celebrex came out literally the same time.
Okay.
One was made by, I think, Merck, and one was made by Lilly. Merck made Vioxx, Celebrex made Lilly. They're both COX-2 inhibitors. They're almost the same drug, but there must be something different about Vioxx because it had all kinds of cardiac events and Celebrex didn't.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I remember.
It was the same drug. And Celebrex worked. I think Celebrex does not work.
You think
right?
so?
I can take Celebrex. I don't feel a thing. Like I'd rather take 800 milligrams of ibuprofen. Celebrex does nothing for me.
I feel
Maybe
like
that's why it's not as dangerous.
yeah, right.
Probably why it's
There's
not
nothing
tearing
in
people's
it.
hearts in half.
I feel like everybody in the gym for jujitsu or like that were training like weightlifting, I think everybody at some point had Vioxx on them.
I believe it. That
Those
stuff
were
That's
works.
crazy.
It works.
those
I'm
were on.
glad I didn't. I'm glad I didn't take that much of it. Luckily, at the time, I was taking a lot of narcotics.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Oh,
love
that does cause addiction. It doesn't blow your heart up.
I love hearing. I would like to hear this too. I truly don't believe you would be who you are today without going through that miserable struggle. I really don't. Right? I really
Yeah.
don't. And the hardest thing that the hardest thing about pain and struggle is to think that it has a purpose,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because if you told me in the middle of a miserable neck, I think I had surgery in October, and if you told me like that June, July, August, they're like, hey, this is going for a reason. I'm like, yeah, the
Right.
reason is that I don't have a loaded gun in my house because I'm pretty close to like this is like enough, like the kind of pain that you have where like you would probably want to break your finger to take away the pain in your neck. Like I would break my finger to get rid of the pain,
Yeah, that was
right?
bad.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's like real pain, right? And then like the depression that comes with it.
Here's the thing too, like not to cut you off,
No,
but if you've never had that kind of pain, there's no way you can understand it because I when you're young, like I remember before I ever had chronic pain, I remember thinking like, okay, I know what my entire thought around pain was around acute pain, right? What's it feel like when you sprain an ankle? What's it feel like when you break an arm? What's it feel like? And you know that that's not what it feels like, and so you just almost like it's not that you minimize it, but you can't comprehend it. You can't comprehend what it feels like to feel like that every minute of every day, day after day, week after week, and the compounding effect that it has on your mental state, your psyche, you know.
And that's why I told Josh, like we had another guy on a couple weeks ago now, and we kind of started talking about pain. And I told him, I was like, this would be such a good thing to talk about because there's so many people that live in pain. And I just did
You're right.
a quick search on ChatGPT. What percent of Americans deal with chronic pain? 1 in 5 American adults, according to the 2021 CDC estimate. Like that's a lot of people that live in chronic pain. And I
20% of
firmly
the country.
believe, right. I firmly believe that people don't always see a way out of chronic pain. And like luckily you guys are very well connected and you have someone like
oh, yeah.
Sean, or you have people in your
Mhm.
circle that you've been active with that will say like, hey, let's go do something about this pain. And a lot of people don't have that. They don't have the
No,
same access to it or don't know what to do.
you're right. And
And I
I
think it
mean,
needs to be talked about.
and I'm in healthcare, like for a living,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
Still, and I couldn't find the right person. Like I didn't know what to do or how to deal with it. Yeah, you're right. I mean, you're totally right. It is a, which is one of the reasons why, when Purdue was pushing all this stuff back in the early 2000s, it took off like wildfire because
Mhm.
there are tons of people in pain and there are tons of doctors that want a solution for that, right? But the solution, at least from my experience, isn't a pill. It's a lot harder than that, and it's something that most people aren't willing to do.
Right.
When I had neck surgery, I did my neck surgery without pain meds after because
Oh dang,
I've
that's
had two,
hardcore.
well, I didn't have a choice. I had two episodes in my life where I became dependent on pain pills. One, I had a par fracture, a back injury in 2007
Mm-hmm.
that led to me being able to lift taking pain pills, and that was a problem. And then I had an arm surgery in 2015. And I actually remember breaking my arm, going into the doctor, uh, and getting a morphine drip.
Oh dang. All
Yeah.
right.
And I got a morphine drip. My arm was completely turned around. They're like, well, you might be in shock. I'm like, oh, no, I'm not in shock. I'm pissed that my arm's broke because that means I'm going to miss jujitsu next week. right?
Classic boys.
Yeah, I'm like, no, I'm pissed because I'm out jujitsu next week and probably for the next 2 months, and I got a pain pill prescription thinking this time it would be different, and it wasn't. It turned in like you did, to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to like, oh, this is fun. What's this do with a glass of wine, right? And you're like, wonder what can happen here with a wine and pain pills,
I
right?
know.
Yeah, that
It's
wasn't good.
weird too.
That was never good. So
Not,
I knew
yeah,
my mom actually
you knew.
my mom came to live here strictly for the fact that she's like, I'm going to surgery, I'm getting done, I'm making sure this isn't a bigger deal because I know that you'll be head first pain meds.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's just me. Like it's that all or nothing attitude. But
I was the same way when I was like detoxing from them. You know, that was the guy that like helped me through the detox part. That's what he told my wife, is like, he goes, make sure every pill is out of that house.
you told
Right.
me a
And
story that you were actually looking through old pant pockets.
oh, I was looking through everything. Right. And in the beginning, right, she was like, okay, I'm gonna watch you throw it in the toilet. Right. So I think I got 4 or 5 of them and managed to get them out of there and put them in a different bottle with some other stuff and like mix it up so that she didn't know they were in there. And then I threw all the rest of them away, and I was like, just in case. Not, I wasn't planning on taking them, but I was like, just in case. Which obviously I was lying to myself. Um, and I think I was probably, I don't know, day 2,
Yeah.
and
You
I was,
scared? You scared
yeah,
of like be without
yeah,
it?
and I took one, and it was like euphoria again, right? And then so that one got me through to day 3, and on day 3, I don't know what it was, but like my wife, she's like super sleuth, like Sherlock Holmes, right? She literally, and I can't lie to her, like I just can't. She goes, "Did you like hide any pills before you threw those other ones away?" And I just didn't say anything, right? I was like, "Because I'm not gonna lie to you, but I'm not."
Yeah.
I just
Just
I just
like,
went.
I'm
No,
actually
so
sitting
here,
here with you going
no,
like, just say nothing.
so no, this is what I said. I actually remember this because she says this all the time. I go, "What do you mean?" She's like, she goes, "Every time you don't want to tell me the truth, you say, 'What do you mean?'" She goes, "Where are they?" So I went, kind of hung my head, pulled them out. I said, "They're in here." She goes, I go, that there's also like, that's, she goes, "Pull them out, put them on the counter. Let me see them all." She's like, "Is that it?" I was like, "Yeah." So we threw them away, which that was it. But you're right. There was like a point, I think it was like 2 days later, where I was like going through every one of my pants pockets because, you know, I used to always have a pill in one of my pockets, you know, to make sure that like I didn't know if I left the bottle at home or something, I always had something. So I was combing through everything I could find, coat pockets, everything.
I bet she did it before you. I bet she went through
Great,
every
great, great.
pocket and said, I'm gonna find them.
Yeah.
You know what? You are exactly right. She did. Like I found out later on afterwards because I didn't tell her I was going through the pockets, but I actually asked her later, like when we were just talking about it, like later. And I said, yeah, there was a point where I went through like every pair of pockets I had. She goes, yeah, I went through those 2 days ahead of time. She goes, that's one of the first things the counselor told me was go through his coats, go through his pants, go anything with pockets, see if you can find them. She goes, I found like
That's my
3 or 4 of
girl.
them in there.
She
That's
found
my
3 or
girl.
4. She
Yeah.
found 3 or 4. Did you know they were there? Or did you were like,
No, I didn't know. I figured I probably had some in some pants because I like or something, you know, winter coats, like all that stuff. I figured somewhere there was something, and
so
I
these
couldn't
things were
find
like
one
pens
anywhere.
and
I was like,
pencils. Yeah.
I go, this is not like the odds are not like I can't believe I can't find one, right? But yeah, she had gone through them ahead of time.
It's like trying to find a pen. You reach in your pocket or an old coat. Oh, there's a pen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
$5.
There's a pill,
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Um,
That's right.
I want to know,
yeah.
maybe on like a very personal question, and I know you kind of touched on what you're up to now and how you're able to train and to bow hunt
Yeah.
and everything. How else has life improved since getting out of
So I
most of your
mean,
pain?
every way imaginable. You know, I mean, mentally, I'm back to from a personality standpoint where I was, where where I've always been. I think like narcotics and that kind of stuff dulls your personality, right? Because you're just kind of puts you in this constant state of like being
Hmm.
dull, And I
Mhm.
don't think dull like boring, but it dulls your brain a little bit. It makes you foggy. Um, and that means if you're funny, you lose some of your wit. If you're really sharp or respond to things really quickly, that slows down. So mentally, a lot more acute. I'm kind of back to being my old personality wise. Performance wise, yes, I still have some pain, but I can manage it with ibuprofen and ice. And I'm able to push my body like hard. I mean, I train uh 5 days a week in the gym, like early in the morning. They're usually 45 minutes to an hour, and they're very like specifically focused around training for the mountain. So tons of core and legs and stabilizer muscles and that kind of stuff, which is actually great for my back. And then on Saturdays I do a long ruck with like a weighted pack, like anywhere from 5 to 8 miles. Usually out in the woods somewhere where I can get a little bit of elevation. Um, Productivity wise, really, I'm 57, but my business is like better than it's ever been before. Um, we just took on, my wife does like home renovation, like we'll buy houses and she fixes them up, and sometimes we sell them. We actually just bought a house up at the school that my daughter goes to college. That school, the Young Life, which is the college Christian organization, lost the house they were meeting in, and we kind of spent a couple of months trying to find something that we could renovate and then create a space for them. And we're actually in the process of doing that right now, and that's kind of my wife's project. So
Cool.
I put something on Instagram yesterday, but it's interesting you asked me that question because we had we're reflooring the whole house, and I don't have any skill around building and stuff. My wife is great at that. She does like cuts tile, like cuts. She's super good at all that stuff. And I just do labor. I'm like, tell me what's hard and I'll go do it. And so she's like, okay, I need all the flooring brought in like picked up and brought into the house, which was like 3 truckloads of flooring. It ended up being like 3,032 or 3,300 pounds worth of flooring. And Saturday was for about 2.5 hours. That's what I did is I just got all the flooring, like 3 different trips, and brought all of it into the house. And I put this thing on Instagram, and it was basically just said, be capable, and then I put some stuff underneath it. But it's just, when you are able to push yourself, and this is again, I know everyone doesn't think like this, but for me, being back at a place where I can actually push my body to limits and test myself and continue to push myself past boundaries, just having the physical capability to do that is like, has literally given me new life. So
Mhm.
it's not as, I don't want to say it's as profound as, having a cancer diagnosis where you're going to die and then finding out you're going to live. But if you think you're going to live the rest of your life completely miserable and you realize you don't have to do that, it is a completely life-changing event. And so, and again, the thing that I will say too, and I know like the other thing that it's done for me, like Gray, is I was always a believer, like I was always a Christian, but I like my faith has become so much stronger through this process because like God took me to a point where I physically could not do it myself. And I had always been one of those people who could, no matter what the hurdle was, I could get over it. I could figure out a way to do it, and so, and a lot of my self-esteem was built around that. And I think I gave myself a lot more credit than I deserved. A lot of my success in life has been God given. And this was one of those situations where I realized I couldn't fix it. The only one that could do it was God. And the withdrawal experience, which is a longer story, but it, there was a time, I think it was day 4, y'all, where, and I don't know if you've ever heard this, but when you're coming off of benzos, you get this thing where like you literally feel like your legs won't stay still. Like they want to just like not, they don't move automatically, but you can't lay still. You just want to like move your legs because you feel like you're going to go crazy. I can't even really explain it past that. But I hadn't slept more than 2 hours in like 4 days. I just couldn't sleep. My legs were like, and so I would get up, I would walk around the house for like an hour, and then I would try to lay back down. And I would lay there. I usually couldn't fall asleep, and I'd get up and I'd just keep walking. And I remember, I think it was like the 4th night, and I was laying in bed, and there was this song that came out by Hillsong. It was brand new, and it was called Through the Fire. And I probably had listened to it 50 times in my headphones because I was just trying to do something to distract myself. And I was praying like over and over and over to just that God would just get me through the withdrawal process. And I swear to you, at a point in there, like everything kind of became clear, and there was this blue light that just kind of appeared, and it was the only time in my entire life that I felt like I heard God speak directly to me, and it was like, I'm gonna get you through this. And I literally within 5 minutes fell asleep. I slept for like 6 hours. I woke up, and it didn't get like super easy, but at that point everything got easier, and the withdrawal got better. It was easier to not take stuff. I felt like my willpower was better, and like that was the beginning of an upslope. And so I made this commitment coming out of that. I had always been somebody who worked out late in the day. I liked to sleep. I'd get up 30 minutes before my first meeting at like 7:30 or 8, and I was like, I need to spend more time in the Word and more time praying, like on a regular basis. And so I literally flipped the script. I started getting up every day at 4:45. First thing I would do, and I still do this to this day, I do like 45 minutes of Bible study. I've read the Bible through. Like I had never done that before. I'd always tried to read the Bible through in a year and couldn't do it. And I'm on my third year in a row doing it. And so I'll read my Bible verses for the day. There's like 10, 15 minutes of prayer time included in that. And then as soon as I'm done with that, I'm in the gym. And by the time that's all over, it's still like 7 o'clock, and I've got like 2 hours before my first meeting. And so that's the other thing that I think is directly attributable to my life being so much better, is I've got such an improved closeness and relationship with Jesus.
Is it an amazing? Let me ask you this question.
And I know that's not for everybody, so
No,
I don't want that
no,
to come off as preachy.
no.
It's
No,
just
but
me.
everybody
That's
finds
like my personal journey.
everybody finds a path, whatever they relate to. Whatever
Yeah.
you find that, because I feel like with anything, like it was a sense of relief. Like for once in the last however many years, you felt like you could lean on somebody else.
That's a
Whether
great
it
way to
was
put it. Yeah, you're
right.
right. Hmm.
Do you ever
That's a great way to put it.
do you ever have this? Do you ever think, well, why did it take so much pain, anguish, depression? Why did it have to take all that to get my attention?
Because you're hard headed.
Yeah, I know
Like most
why.
of us, I need
Yeah,
somebody to put it
yeah,
right in front of me too.
exactly. You know what? I really like don't. I mean, I've probably thought that at some point, but I'm more than anything like I'm just like so grateful for where I am that I don't really dwell on like what I went through. It was awful and it was miserable. But I don't ever think, oh, I wished I hadn't like gone through that. Or I mean, for whatever reason, that was the journey that I had to go through, or I was put through. And I'm just honestly so blessed and thankful that I am where I am now, that I'm 57 years old. I train really hard. I'm in sharp. My wife actually just said the other day, she goes, I think you might be in the best shape like that you've ever been in the 20 years we've been together. And I used to do triathlons and stuff, but
Yeah. But
she's
it's
like, the
probably
stuff,
like physical and mental and spiritual
yeah,
and emotional. It's
kind of
everything.
everything. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep. And so, yeah, I don't ever really do that. I just kind of, take the blessing that I've got, and I'm thankful for it. And I just kind of keep marching forward. And every day, like part of my prayer life is just that I will stay capable, you know?
Capable. Yeah. Have you
Yeah.
had any conversations with people that are like, man, I got that chronic back pain too? And then you're like, well, let me tell you what to do. Let me like,
Yeah.
you been able to have other people or connect with other people who have gone through chronic pain, or people that hurt, or have you met other people that have gone through what you've gone through?
I have, do you know that Apogee program that Tim Kennedy founded?
Yeah.
You ever heard of that? So, the other guy, Matt Bedreau,
Yeah.
that founded it with him. So Matt had me on, like he's got a mentorship group for men And they have like a guest on every week that's entrepreneur or whatever. And so he asked me to be a guest one week, and I was on. And part of that story came out, and there was a guy that messaged me afterwards. It was like, "Hey, I'm going through the exact same thing you were going through. Like, do you mind if I talk to you a little bit?" So I jumped on a call with him for like an hour, and I talked to him a couple other times. He hasn't done the physical therapy thing yet. Like, and I actually went to Sean, because I mean, that's the thing is, Sean told me there's only like 10% of physical therapists that approach things the way he does, right? It's a subgroup of physical therapy that is doing things that are doing things that are much different than traditional training. And I was like, okay, so this guy lives in Denver. I was like, how could he find that guy? Like, what questions does he ask? He said, well, so Sean gave me some questions for him to ask, but then he also said there's this pretty big clinic out west, and he said they tend to approach things the same way, and there's one of those in Denver. So that's what I told him to do. And the last time I talked to him was probably 6 weeks ago, and he hadn't done it. But he asked me if he could talk to me again this week, so I'm gonna find out. But if he didn't, I'm gonna do the Josh Ortegon on him and be like, get your freaking butt into the PT's office, or like, stop complaining, like go get something done and be proactive.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. I love your story. I love, well, first off, when you actually came to me, dude. I think you called me one day, and I was like, you text me, and then I think you called me. This was a couple years ago. Or you text me, it's like, hey, you got a second? And I'm like, yeah, sure. You go, I want to thank you for sending Sean my way. I didn't even know you were going through it, bro. I didn't even know. Sean never
Well,
said
that's the worst part, right? Is
I just thought
I will speak for myself. I was ashamed, and I didn't tell anybody.
I didn't even know you were going through it when we were coaching together. I didn't even know you went to go see Sean. I just remember going like, hey man, you should literally go see, like, it's different. Take your time to do it. And then I just went on my life.
Right.
Like I didn't think anything of it until you told me this is what I was going through when we were coaching together, and this is what has happened since with Sean. And I remember my mouth like, what? Like I just went, hey, go see Sean, and went on my like my merry old life, like doing my own thing, and never blew my
But I think the thing that, like, the lesson that comes out of that, right, is you don't realize the change you can make in somebody's life, and you may never realize it, right? I picked up the phone and called you and told you because I was super appreciative of it and I wanted you to know. But I think that there's so many times when we talk to somebody, we may say something to them that just seems normal, that may have such an impact on the way that they live their life, or the way they're able to live their life, or a decision they make that can change their life, that we just really need to be thoughtful about the interactions we have with people, because they can, potentially you could change somebody's life with something that seems like nothing to you.
Yeah, man. I mean, I don't realize it. There are probably people, and I think about it, I've had people say things to me that have changed my complete perspective on life or things that I've done. I can think of one specifically, and that person probably has no clue.
You should tell them, or her, whoever it is.
I should. I 100% should. Right? Because we just don't think about it. Like maybe like, oh, they don't remember or whatever. And so here, like, my kid has a crazy good heart. Like my kid can't see homeless people.
Mm-hmm.
My kid sees homeless people. He is he doesn't understand why.
That's what Kale is like.
For sure. Oh, I can for sure see that. Right? Just a soft heart. Dude, I've said things to Kale that hurt his feelings, and I didn't know I hurt his feelings.
Yeah, Kale's good. If for people listening, Kale's my third child. He just graduated from Carolina, but he's such a goofball that he just seems like, when you see him, you think nothing phases him. But he's like one of these like super tenderhearted like kids.
Yeah. We had a guy. We were leaving jujitsu. We're rolling down the street, and this homeless guy's walking the street, and all of a sudden, He just starts walking. He's out of it. He starts walking against traffic.
Dang.
And I just keep turning left, and I keep looking in the mirror, and my kid goes, "Daddy, aren't you going to do anything?"
What does that tell you?
Dude, we're desensitized to people's struggles.
It
We all,
also tells you how much your kids pay attention to the choices you make.
and I
Right?
go,
He said something to you, but how often would a kid not say anything and just
right?
think like, "Oh wow, I thought maybe we should have done something there,
He
but I
goes,
guess
"Daddy,
not."
aren't you going to do anything?" So I remember calling 911, explaining the situation. They put somebody on. They asked if they wanted to call back, and I was like, "Yeah, can you give me a call back?" And they called me back. My kid heard him talk about how they got the person, they're getting him off to safe. Thank you for calling. And my kid's like, and dude, I wasn't going to do anything. I was just like, homeless people everywhere, man. Homeless people. And my kid
Yeah,
was like, "No, Daddy, aren't you going to do something? Like, why are you just going to let this human being walk down the street?" Man, you become callous a little bit to life, maybe.
I
Right?
think we do. We do. I remember I can't. I had my daughter with me, and she was maybe in eighth grade, and there was this lady in the parking lot at Walmart, um, and she had like two kids with her that looked like they were probably 6 and 9, something like that. And she had a sign up that was like, need money for food. And I don't know, my daughter said something about it. Like, and sometimes I'll stop like and give money to people like that. And we kind of drove past, and she said something to me, and she goes, "What do you think is going to happen to them?" And I I literally just turned around, went back, pulled up to him, and I said, "Tell me what's going on with y'all." Well, we've been traveling from Florida, and we're going to, I can't remember where they were going, and our car broke down, and we don't have any place to stay, and our car's not working. I said, "So y'all by yourself?" And they're like, "No, my husband and my two sons are like on the other side of the parking lot with a sign." Right. So long story short, we picked them up, put them in my truck. I took them to a hotel. I paid for a hotel for 3 nights, and then we figured out what was wrong with her vehicle and like got it in the shop, got it fixed, and I gave them like $300. And it was like, I don't know, I think I came off the hip for the whole thing, like probably $700. But like my daughter, like she saw something that day that has had an impact on her whole life.
Wow.
Like she has so much empathy for people, and I think that's like one of the reasons God has blessed me financially is so that I can do things like that. So I look for opportunities, and sometimes I'll just give people money, right? But sometimes I try to figure out like they might need more than that, and that was just one of those like weird times, But it was a pretty unique situation, but it made a huge impact on her. And I think just from what you said, you know, the decisions we make or don't make will form, our job as parents is to raise great adults, great husbands, great fathers, great mothers, great wives. Um, and those little things all add up to the adults that they're going to become, that we do or don't do. So that what you did that day is going to have a huge impact on him,
Well, he
and the man
convicted
that he becomes.
he convicted he had disappointment in his voice. He goes, "Daddy,
Yeah,
aren't you doing something?"
but now he looks at you as the guy who helps people that
Yeah.
can't help themselves, right? He sees like you're going to be like, that's just one more like thing that's going to make him want to be like you, like to be a good man, right?
Man,
And that's ultimately what we
he
want to
did
be is
jujitsu for 2 years, from 5 to 7. And then he wanted to do soccer, and I just can't do the drive around thing. Like I can't. I bless those parents that can do 16
the
different
traveling soccer thing.
the the oh, we got Monday, Tuesday this, Wednesday, Thursday this, Friday that. No, we pick one thing during the season, we do it. And um he used to ask me, "Well, Daddy, why do I do jujitsu? Or like I like it and I like doing it, but what's the reason I do it?" And I said, "So you can protect yourself, so you can protect others, and you can protect people that can't protect themselves."
Mm-hmm.
And I made him repeat that will always defend people who can't protect themselves. You'll
Right.
use your skill set to protect people who can't protect. First, protect yourself, protect the people you love, and protect the people that can't protect themselves. That's the reason
Mm-hmm.
we do it. And it was all fun and games until I walked to pick him up in his after school. I open the door and I hear a little boy, and it's his voice telling somebody else, you got to sink that choke deeper around the neck. Dude, true story. He was in the corner where teachers couldn't see him. I opened the door. My kid is showing another kid how to slip
How
a
to do a chokehold.
choke to get it deep. My kid goes, no, you got to slip that choke deeper through the neck. You get it. And there's these 8-year-old kids. My kid's showing them how to rear naked choke each other.
Taking them to school, man.
Corner of the class. My son, you don't do that. And he's like, well, Daddy, you show people how to do that all the time, and you do it. Why can't I show other people? I'm like, no, it's just like the look of it and like do it. Like it's cool, but I'm gonna be honest with you. When we're leaving, we get in the car. There's a smirk on my face. I'm like,
You're a little proud. You're a little proud.
you're right, son. Just keep that choke a little deeper to get that
Yeah,
definition.
that's
Hey, I
exactly
appreciate
right.
you coming on, man. I'm gonna honor your time, everybody's time. I think you have a great story. I hope you keep telling your story. I hope people watch this. Um, we started this around health and fitness for performance, and I think Gray can even say it. I want this to be a platform to tell people's story so that other people can hear it, and so people can listen to it and go, I'm going through something like that, right?
Mhm.
If there's anybody who is more too modest for his own good, it's Sean.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Sean's just as like solid as they come. You
I
know.
tell him all the time, I'm like, dude, you've helped a lot of people. He's like, oh, just, doing what I do
Just
and
doing my job, just
doing
doing my
my
thing,
job.
right?
Oh, no, big, there's a lot of people that can do this. I'm like, shut up, Sean. Take a compliment, right?
There are not a lot of people that can do that. No, there are
No,
not.
take a compliment. And my story about Sean is all the jujitsu guys go to him, and I tell people Sean's actually not that smart because Sean decided to go start jujitsu after treating all the broken jiu. And I'm like, Sean, how does that not talk you out of training? Like, how did that talk you into training? Like
Right.
doesn't talk you. And he's like, no, I just all you guys were
You're
so
putting everybody back together.
yeah.
Mhm.
I'm like, so hey man, I really appreciate your time, brother.
Yeah, thank you so
Hey,
much.
no, I enjoyed it. I appreciate y'all having me on. This is, I think the one thing I was going to say, which you just said something that made me think about this, but you said this is a show about performance, right? And all those kinds of things. But there's there's a point like in everybody's life where their body's not going to respond the way that they're used to it responding, and sometimes and a lot of times if they have some kind of an injury or debilitating thing that lasts a long time, mentally it can really impact you and take you down like this dark road. And I can only speak for myself, but I know a lot of men are like this. It's like we don't want to tell anybody, right? It's we're ashamed that we're don't feel as capable as we used to. We're ashamed because we feel weak because we can't control this thing or something is taking control over us, whether it's drugs or alcohol. Like if you get in that situation, again, like my wife is the one who ultimately, shook me out of it and said, we got to do something different and put me on the path of making a decision to like get out of that really bad situation. But it's because she figured it out, right? And she was like strong enough. But not everybody has that. If you are in that place, you need to ask for help. It's not weakness, right? It's you got to throw yourself a lifeline and ask somebody you trust to help you so that you're not doing it on your own. Because to me, I think that's one of the most depressing, one of the biggest things that causes depression is feeling alone and feeling like you're harboring this secret that you can't tell anybody because if you did, they would think like so badly of you. And they really is they won't. If they love you, they're gonna want to help you. And that's the lie we all tell ourselves. So that's what I would leave people with is like ask for help.
Mhm.
Man, I think that's a great way to end it. I hope people hear that. And I think there's a lot of people. I had no clue how you were struggling. I just said go see Sean and went on my day.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people that, and dude, so I'll say this. At the church we started going to, I started working in the morning with people that are just coming want to hear about the church. Like my buddy Chris said,
Yeah.
just come and start working at this thing and just meet some people's stories. So your story sounds familiar. I'll be honest with you, in the last 4 weeks, I have heard stories that you only hear on TV.
I think those
Mhm.
stories are a lot more common than we all think they
That's
are. It's just no
exactly what
one tells them.
Yes. I have heard stories about and like, hey, what brought you in here? I tried to kill myself last week and I have nowhere else to go. I'm like, I'm not
What?
pre like
Right?
like I thought
Yeah.
like, what brought you in here? Oh, my kid went here and we liked it, so we want to go. What? I like what? One guy walked in and he's like, I've been an alcoholic for 20 years. Like just the stories, like and I'm
Yeah.
just, dude, I live in a completely different world. Like I didn't know things like this. I thought this was a TV show.
There's so many broken people out there. All you have to do is start talking to people and you'll figure that out.
You know what I
That's
think?
what you just did.
Ask them a question and listen.
Mhm.
And
Be a
people
better listener.
that will
Mhm.
blow your mind. So, all right, man, I appreciate you coming on, brother.
Yeah, thank
Hey,
you so
thanks
much.
for having me. It was great talking to you both.
With all due respect.
Hey, we're Josh Ortegon and Gray Gaines, and this is With All Due Respect, the show where we keep it real about health, fitness, and performance. From weight loss to sports development, we're covering the conversations that matter.
Follow us on Instagram at Phenom Fitness, PHNM Fitness, and visit www.phenomfit.com to check out our training programs, coaching, and gear built for real results. Let's get into it.